Shalom, Hebrews. This is a message from the Israelite Brotherhood. Alright, Hebrews. I want to talk about how we've been having a heritage developed by our enemies since the transatlantic slave trade. You know, we can't say what type of thoughts that we had before the transatlantic slave trade, but I kind of know already. You know, we the same in a sense as we were in the biblical days, but now our enemies done magnified it and done expounded on our wickedness and then took it to another level. Alright, Hebrews, you can have a heritage created by our enemies, or you can have a heritage our enemies hate for you to have. You see what I'm saying? See, right now, we got a heritage created by our enemies. You know, our enemies created the titles that we are called by: Negroes, African American, blacks. First it was niggers, coons, Negroes, then black American, then Afro American, because of a hairstyle, not because we had any connections to Africa back then, or that our enemies were trying to connect us to Africa. You know, the Afro American, you know, come from that Afro style. You know, they even had combs and stuff that even had a little black power fist on it. Well, that's where that Afro American come from, and then they slick changed it to African American. Now we know for sure that, you know, we can't, you know, be all these titles that our enemies chose to bestow upon us. Now our enemies so nice that they just give us all these grandiose titles, and then if you look at these titles, they don't have no historical content. They ain't connected to nothing historically in the past. They don't have no history or nothing. It's like, you know, if you look at all the nations on the earth today, they kind of like got a biblical history, whether they want to acknowledge it or not. You know, if you push the folks, they'll say, oh yeah, we from, you know, this is us in the Bible and so forth. But when it come to the descendants of the transatlantic slave trade, they ain't trying to make no connections. And that how our enemies develop our whole heritage, you know, being called blacks, Negroes. You know, if you look at them names, you know, that's like the word black. Black means death, destruction, gloomy, no accomplishment, and it just got a whole negative persona, you know what I'm saying, about the name. And it's like, you know, being called African American, you know, that's not our title, because, you know, African American would be the Africans, the Hamites that left Africa freely on their own, and then move to the Americas, north or south, and then how they would have children, and then their children's would be African Americans. But us descendants from the transatlantic slave trade, we cannot go by that title, African American, because our ancestors didn't come over here freely, you know what I'm saying, to live in America. You know, we the descendants of people that was taken into captivity during the transatlantic slave trade, and you know, those people were Hebrews. So we are still Hebrews. If our ancestors were Israelites, then their descendants are Israelites. But, you know, our enemies, the people who have been controlled of our whole existence here in America, has called us other names: African Americans, blacks, Negroes. You know what I'm saying? It's like the educational system. Hebrews, if you only knew what you were up against, the people who set the educational system, that's like us. We don't have no say on what our education, you know, should be in the school curriculum, and how our enemies, you know, define everything of what we should accept as education, and then, them folks is so wicked that they teaching our kids, man, to be something else, to like, multiculturalism. They teaching our kids to not have a separate single identity, but teaching them to be inclusive with all the other cultures as if we won, but those other cultures didn't share the same tragedies that we went through as a people. Man, there's a lot going on in the Hebrew world. But like I say, you can have a heritage today that your enemies didn't create. That's like the system, the people who enslaved us and they descendants, and the educational system that they set up. It's like the educational system is totally governed by the Babylonian scribes. I'm here to tell you every aspect of it, and they trying to educate our people or guide our people in the educational world where they want them to go, and for them to have the mindset that they want them to have, and then that's what's happening. They trying to destroy us with their education. That's like, within their educational system, they trying to, teach, our youths and descendants to be tolerant of wickedness and to embrace it under the title of freedom of expression for everybody. You see, that's the Babylonian system and the Babylonian culture, which the Creator was against. Against, the same as in Egypt. Egypt and Mesopotamia had that all-inclusive culture where, they take all the ethnic groups from other nations and bring them into Egypt, and Egypt try to educate them under their, educational curriculum. Same with what happened in Babylon. How all the nations and all the peoples, all the different ethnic groups would go to wicked Babylon to be educated. Well, America is a replica of Egypt in ancient Babylon, and its educational system is controlled by the Babylonian scribes, and they teaching our kids to be wicked. They teaching our kids to be wicked and taking them away from their heritage. That's like the school curriculum teach that that man come from monkeys and stuff, and that monkeys and apes monkeys and apes, and that how we come from, that the Big Bang and all that old wicked stuff. Our enemies try to define what we should accept as reality, and that's what the Creator was against. That's like, I was reading, and I come to the whole conclusion, with the scriptures. We had it simple in the promised land when we was there before we was driven out for breaking the covenant, that how all we had to do was a simple thing, was worship no other gods. The Creator told us, to worship no other gods. And our conditions for staying on the land, the promised land that the Creator gave us, was that we worship the Creator Yah, was our only conditions, and how that was simple, and how we couldn't do that, and how, that destroyed us and sent us into captivity. We had it easy. All we had to do was get into the promised land, and then just worship Almighty Yah, and then don't worship the enemy gods, the people who He was sending us in there to destroy. And then come to find out, the people who we was sent in to destroy, how about they set the educational curriculum up and set this whole system up that we are in bondage in now, and how the same wickedness that the Creators sent us in the promised land before we broke covenant to destroy, it's the same wickedness that we are governed by now. And the same wickedness that drove us to destruction, how about our enemies got us living in the same filth and so forth, and how that we got to break up out of this culture that our enemies had set forth for us. You know, we got to come out of it because it's destroying us, and we can never be the people that we supposed to be. And we know that every ethnic group on the face of this earth has a home base. We don't have no home base. We still in captivity, and we still being controlled by our oppressors. And then our oppressors force us to be on they gods that they know destroy us. You know, it's like, man, coming from the slavery days, how our ancestors was on Christianity, and how we see now today that Christianity was created to destroy. You know, I got plenty of videos showing how the exiles, the people that was taken to Babylon, the Israelites that was taken to Babylon during the Babylonian Wars, and how those Israelites, that 1% come back from Babylon and was destroyed, and how they never made it into the New Testament time. You know, I got plenty of history about that. You know, but this is what I want to show, that, you know, that the Creator had outlined it in Prophet Moses too, is that if we got into the promised land and start following the ways of our enemies, the people we was to destroy, how we would be driven off the land, and how it would be fast and it wouldn't be long. And then I show from our Exodus with Moses around about 1446 BC. I think Moses passed away 1406 BC, and then Prophet Joshua come on, and then Prophet Joshua would last, I think, to 1375 BC. But how we was told that if we go into the promised land and we didn't destroy our enemies, how they would become a snare to us. Do you Hebrews know what a snare is? Man, a snare is something that'll take hold on you and hold you. You be trapped. You can't move. You can't go nowhere. You know, that's like our captivity is a snare. You know, you can't go nowhere. You're trapped. You're in bondage. And you know, your whole resources, everything you need from your captors, the people who, you know, got you in a snare. And it's like, you know, in a snare, you can't eat, you can't move, you can't drink, you can't do nothing. You're caught up. And then that's how we are. We caught up in the snare. And that's just what the Creator said, that our enemies will be a snare to us. And then you look at everything that our enemies represent, it represent a snare. They culture. If you get caught in the belief system of our enemies, it's a snare. You caught up. You know what I'm saying? And you can't see no truth and, you know, have a sense of well-being. But this, what I want to show, is how the Creator told us over and over, don't fool with them folks and to destroy them. For ye know we have dwelt in the land of Egypt, and how we come through the nations which ye have passed, and ye have seen their abominations, and their idols, wood and stone, silver and gold, which were among them, lest there should be among you men or women or family or tribe whose heart turn away this day from the Elohim our Yah to go and serve the gods of the nations, lest there should be among you a root that beareth gold and woolworm. You know what I'm saying? And it come to pass, when he heareth the words of these curses, that he bless himself in his heart, saying, I shall have peace, though I walk in the imagination of my heart to add darkness to thirst. The Elohim would not spare him, but then the anger of the Elohim and his jealousy shall smoke against that man, and all the curses that are written in this book shall lie upon him. And the Elohim shall blot his name out from above heaven. You know, and then if you look at these, you know, curses and what Prophet Moses said that we shouldn't do, is basically what we doing now, up under our enemies' rule. You know, and Prophet Moses even knew that we would go into a captivity because the Creator told him that we will break the covenant. You know, that's like I said, the only conditions for staying on the promised land was that you worship Almighty Yah, and that anything else would get us driven out. And I can show that we was driven into Africa during the Babylonian Wars because we said that we wanted to worship Egyptian religion. You know, the Egyptians tricked us. And it come to pass when all these things were come upon thee. And it shall come to pass when all these things are come upon thee, the blessings and the curses which I have set before thee, thou shalt call them to mind among all the nations where the Elohim thy Yah shall drive thee. You see what I'm saying? And that's what we've been doing. We've been calling this to mind the troubles and the things we have been going through since we've been in this captivity. You know, some of us done woke up to realize that we are the very Israelites, the very Hebrews that Prophet Moses was telling and giving instructions in the Tanakh history, and how we are they descendants. And how about all the prophecies that Prophet Moses said come to pass, especially the curses, and then how I can show that we are the Hebrews that the Tanakh is talking about. You know, I know in all these other videos, you know, you'll come to this understanding, but it's important to really understand this, and then to possibly change the culture and heritage that our enemies had set up for us, because it's destruction. Just like Prophet Moses said that, you know, this day he giving you life and death, and to follow the Creator, you know what I'm saying, is life, and to disobey the Creator is death. And then that's basically how our life was. You know what I'm saying? And he says this right here. Let me see if this is it. All right. But if then heart turn away, so that thou would not hear, but shall be drawn away and worship other gods and serve them. You see, that's what happened to us in the promised land. We got drawn away. Man, they tricked us left and right. Man, our enemies hated us to have the covenant. Like our enemies would hate for us to have a heritage that they didn't develop or that they didn't guide. You see what I'm saying? And I got a video showing that in the Hebrew world that them Jews ain't slipping, and how they trying to get the black Jews, the people who didn't go through the transatlantic slave trade or suffer none of the curses, to be the guiding light that we go to. But how about we ain't finna go for that? Because, you know, we know that if you didn't get on no ships to no slavery as the curses calls for, that you can't be no Hebrew Israelite. You know, it's a whole lot going on. You know, our enemies want to control us from beginning to end, because, you know, if they control us and then guide us wrong, then they keep the heritage that we abandoned to them. You see what I'm saying? We can't let that keep going on. Look, for that I command thee this day to love the Elohim thy Yah, to walk in his ways, and to keep his commandment and his statutes and his judgment, that thou mayest live and multiply. And the Elohim thy Yah shall bless thee in the land where thou goest to possess it. But if then heart turn away, so that thou wilt not hear, but shall be drawn away and worship other gods and serve them, I denounce unto you this day that ye shall surely perish, and that ye shall not prolong your days upon the land, whether thou goest over Jordan to possess it. I call heaven and earth to record this day against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Therefore choose life, that both thou and thy seed may live, that thou mayest love the Elohim thy Yah, that thou mayest obey his voice, and that thou mayest cleave unto him, for he is thy life in the length of thy days, that thou mayest dwell in the land which the Elohim swore unto thy fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give them. Okay, look, our whole well-being as a people came in us worshiping the Creator. Point blank. We had to worship the Creator, and anything less than that would destroy us and keep us in misery and death and in oppression and being oppressed by our enemies. That's a fact. And that's like right now today, our oppression come from us not worshiping Almighty Yah. You know what I'm saying? Because Prophet Moses said, and it shall come to pass when all these things are come upon thee, the blessings and the curses which I have set before thee, that thou shalt call them to mind among all the nations where the Elohim that Yah have driven thee. So our enemy gonna be purposely trying to keep your man from calling our troubles to man, or to coming into thought or having thoughts about our bondage and how they are connected to the words that Prophet Moses said. That's why come they got hip hop, they got all this wicked stuff on this TV, they got our community just destroyed, and we up against everything. We the only people on the face of this earth that is up against a whole nation, and we don't have no means and no way to fight that nation, and how all our actions are controlled by this system, and that the only way that we can fight this system is if we turn to our Israelite heritage, something that our enemies have no control of, something that they don't want no part of. They don't want to tell us that we the Hebrew Israelites, and they gonna go out their way to try to convince you that you are not an Israelite. That's their job. And they whole rule come into that. But like Prophet Moses said, our whole prosperity and everything came in worshiping Almighty Yah. And then how about, that was part of the conditions with us being up on the land, and that if we wasn't up on the land, worshiping Almighty Yah, how we would be in a bondage and with the curses that Prophet Moses said, would be on the Israelites. And how about that's been our whole life. That's been our whole life. The curses that Prophet Moses spoke about. And then I could prove, like I do in all the other videos. So let me get this in on here too, how we are the Israelites. Like I said, the Prophet Moses, when we Exodus Egypt 1446 BC, Prophet Moses died in 1406 BC. The Prophet Joshua come on, and then how we was going into the land, and then how Prophet Joshua told us that if we got in the land and then disobeyed and didn't keep what he had going on, the momentum, how we would be destroyed. And then that's what the book of Judges represent. It was the beginning, what I'm saying, of our downfall. Judges 1375 to 1075. That's when King David come on. But if you read Judges, you'll see how we was all messed up, and how we didn't drive out the enemies that was in the land, and how those people would become a thorn unto us, just like the Creator said, that how that they will be a thorn in our side. And if you read the book of Judges, you'll see that we was in all kind of bondages. That's like I show in history that we the most enslaved ethnic group on the face of this earth. Us Israelites are, us people descended from the transatlantic slave trade, and it's like we've been enslaved to just about everybody on the face of this earth, besides the Chinese and them folks. Them folks in the deep part of East Asia, and how all these other folks and kind of like held us in bondage, and how them same people that held us in bondage are here in America setting up another bondage over our head, because the enemies, the strangers that has come within our community are basically the peoples from the east. That's like our whole community is owned by foreigners now. the Arabs, and that was one of the curses, and those are the Edomites, and how that the system is setting them up to enslave us all over again. We've been enslaved by these white folks. We've been dogged out, and now they letting the foreigners come in to enslave us. You know, if the people own all the resources in your community and not putting back, then, you know, you become a slave in your community. And then that's how we are. We get these folks our wealth, you know, at these little corner stores, and then they turn around and buy all the houses and then rent them to us and charge high rent. You see what I'm saying? We being destroyed left and right by our enemies. And how about that was a curse too? You know, that's a curse that the Creator said will be on us. But, you know, like I said, our conditions for being on the land and staying in the promised land and having prosperity was that we worship Almighty Yah. How about Hebrews? We can worship Almighty Yah now. You know, Prophet Moses said that we would call our troubles to mind, and then how, you know, we would, you know, remember, you know, the things that, you know, we've been going through as a people. And it shall come to pass when all these things are come upon thee, the blessings and the curses which I have set before thee, that thou shalt call them to mind among all the nations where the Elohim thy Yah have driven thee. You see what I'm saying? And that's, you know, what we need to do. That's what we need to do. We need to call, you know, everything we done been through to man, and then let these enemies know that we the Israelites. You know, like I say, that's a heritage, you know, that our enemies don't want us to have. You know, our enemies don't want us to be recognized as Israelites. And our enemies, you know, done created a false heritage for us. And then how our enemies hate for us to say that we the Israelites and then have proof like I do. You know, this is a message from the Israelite Brotherhood. Okay, Hebrews, in the book of Judges, you know, we was all messed up. We was all messed up, and how that represent like 275 years of bondages, the book of Judges. And then how we didn't really start to get, you know, some independence and some strength to resist our enemies to Prophet Samuel come about. And then Saul we made king, and then King David. And the reason that the Creator loved King David and he was the apple of the Creator's eye is because King David didn't try to mix up with the enemies. He ain't try to marry into them. He ain't try to worship their gods, and he was strictly for their destruction. And King David, you know, pushed a hard line. And that's the line that our enemies don't want us to have. You know, they don't want us to be the King Davids. You know, the King Davids didn't care nothing about the enemies. If you wasn't of the tribes of Israel, then, you know, you wasn't no priority to King David. You know, that you was basically on the destruction list. Alright, Hebrews. Alright, after King David, then we get Solomon. Our whole heritage from the time of Solomon to now, you know, we was basically destroyed, and how we only had one time from the time of King Solomon to now to get right. And then that was during the reign of King Josiah. He was a prophecy king that was prophesied to come and clean the tribes of Israel up. And he did it, and, you know, it would only last for 30 years, 31 years. And then the Egyptians would kill him and then put us back on Egyptian religion, and then we would go into Africa to be enslaved. You know, so, you know, King Josiah was the only time that we had a chance to be clean. And then how the Egyptians killed him immediately after he done cleaned the Egyptian worship up. And then how we would, you know, go into bondage after that, and then have the heritage that we have now. You know, so Solomon was a evil, wicked king, and he was demoted to prince, and Solomon brung the whole tribes of Israel down because he broke away from what King David did and had going on, and start embracing our enemies and stuff, you know, and married off into them, had children by him. And then, he even had the Egyptians, Pharaoh's daughter and stuff for a wife. So Solomon brought the whole tribes of Israel down. And then how, we would stay destroyed for another 300 years till King Josiah was born around about 631 BC. He cleaned up the whole Israel about 621 BC, and then the Egyptians would come kill him and put us back on the Egyptian religion, and then how we would go into Africa. That's when the Creator sent, the Babylonians to chase us up off the land. And then just like Prophet Moses had said that, you ain't gonna be able to stay on the land long, and how the Creator gonna drive you out if you don't follow him. And then how our only conditions of staying on the land was to worship Almighty Yah. And then worshiping Almighty Yah, he just told us, don't rob each other. Don't be robbing each other. Don't y'all rob each other. Don't y'all be killing. And don't y'all be stealing from each other. Simple stuff. And then how he set our enemies out for us to destroy them. If you had some wrath and you wanted to take it out on somebody, go take it out on your enemies. Don't take it out on your people. And that's the way we had it set up. And we couldn't even do that. That's like now today, our enemies find great joy and pleasure knowing that we destroy ourselves, and how we are our worst enemy, and how it couldn't be no greater enemy to us than ourselves, and how our enemies love this, and how they just, kick back and we're going to destroy ourselves. And that's what Prophet Moses was saying, that the culture that we were getting snared by was death and destruction. And that's what we have now. We are our worst enemies in this captivity. But that's got to change. That's like I say, that you can have a heritage created by our enemies, which is that African American, black, Negro heritage. Or you can have a heritage your enemies hate for you to have, and that's our Israelite heritage, and it's like our enemies hate that we claim in the Israelite heritage, and some of them don't want to believe it. But guess how I nip it in the bud? I show them in the book of Jeremiah how we Israelites say that we didn't want to do the covenant no more, and how we was through with the law, and then how we was through with everything concerning the covenant, and how we said that the reason the Babylonians was coming to get us was because we wasn't doing the Egyptian religion. We said that. We said the reason that the Babylonians was chasing us off the land, this is the 99%, we never returned back to the promised land after being chased into Africa, because we was enslaved, and to show you that the Hebrews that ran into Africa to do the Egyptian religion, the 99%, never returned home, is that you have the book of Ezra, Nehemiah, Zechariah, Malachi. Those books, show you that the people from the transatlantic slave trade are the Hebrews, because we never returned back to the promised land, and how it was a prophecy for the Hebrews to be taken to Egypt in ships, and how we represent that. We represent those Hebrews that was to be taken to Egypt in ships. All right, those are the exiles. Those are the prophets that come back from Babylon, from the captivity, the 1%, and how that they didn't mention or were not reunited with the Hebrews that went into Africa. Us, the 99%. And if you go to 2 Kings, this is during the Babylonian Wars, around about 588 BC. It's like I show that how we only had 800 years on the promised land total. We only had 800 years on the promised land total. We ain't have no longer than that, and how 800 years is not a long time to leave a footprint of who we were. And especially when we was on the Egyptian religion and on the Amorite, Canaanite religion for like 500-600 of those 800 years. Out of the 800 years that we had in the promised land, we did 600 of it on the enemy's religion and the enemy's culture, to where we forsake the creator. You know, the northern kingdom was on the Jeroboam religion all the way from Solomon's death. You know, from at the end of Solomon's death, 931 BC, till we was driven out. You know, and then how we didn't leave a footprint that could identify us or who we are today, because we didn't stay long. Okay, Hebrews, you see them prophets, you know, Ezra, Haggai, Zechariah, Esther, Nehemiah, Malachi. All right, that's the exiles prophet that recorded the Hebrews that was taken to Babylon. And as I showed in, you know, the history, that it was no 10 lost tribes, and how all the tribes was taken to Babylon. And then, you know, how members from all the tribes was taken to Babylon, and that how when they returned, that the people, the 99% that ran into Africa, never come back out to be reunited with them. You know, and how we had said that we was going into Africa to do the Sahara cattle Egyptian religion, and then how, you know, all our problems was happening to us because we didn't want to, you know, do that, and how we had to go into Africa to do that in order to be safe, and that was a state of mind. Look, and all the people, both small and great, and the captains of the armies arose and came to Egypt, for they were afraid of the Chaldeans. You know, they was afraid of the Chaldeans. All right, and then if you go to Jeremiah chapter 44, you will see that it gives you a little more detail about it. You know, this was a state of mind. We was all messed up. You know, we had, during the Babylonian Wars, you know, when the Creator had sent them folks, and they come the first time and snatched some of us, and then we went to the temple and said, hey, we're going to stop robbing and killing and stealing from each other, and then how, you know, we're going to straighten up. And then how about after we left the temple, we start back robbing and stealing and killing from each other. You know what I'm saying? And then the Creator sent for them Scythians, Ashkenazi, to come chase us off the land, to chase us into Africa. And here we are today. And it come to pass that when Jeremiah had made an end of speaking unto all the people the words of the Elohim their Yah, for which the Elohim their Yah had sent him to them, even all these words, then spake Azariah the son of Hoshea, and Johan the son of Ker, and all the proud men, saying unto Jeremiah, thou speakest falsely. The Elohim Yah hath not sent thee to say, go not into Egypt to sojourn there. But Baruch the son of Ner setteth thee on edge for to deliver us into the hand of the Chaldeans, that they might put us to death and carry us away captive to Babylon. So we told the prophet Jeremiah, when the Babylonians came, men to get us, and we ran off into Africa, that, hey man, the Creator didn't say stay on the land, and that how, you know, you trying to set us up to be taken to Babylon, and how we wasn't going for that. And then if you read Jeremiah 44 verse 2, this said the Elohim of hosts, the Yah of Israel, ye have seen all the evil that I have brought upon Jerusalem and upon all the cities of Judah, and behold, this day they are a desolation, and no man dwelleth therein. Either you was in Africa, the millions, the 99%, or you was that one little 1% that was taken to Babylon. The whole land was empty of Hebrews for 50 years, from 588 BC to 538 BC, when the Persians whooped the Babylonians, and then let that little 1% come home. And that when that 1% come home, how they never said that the ones that went into Africa to do the Egyptian religion, that was afraid of the Chaldeans, never come out to be with them, and how we represent them, and how the Creator said that we will be taken to Egypt in ships. You see what I'm saying? And I'm going to show this, how we will be taken to Egypt in ships. You know, and there's no question that we was taken to Egypt in ships for breaking the covenant. You know, There's no question about that. And the Elohim shall bring thee into Egypt again with ship by the way of I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again, and there ye shall be sold unto your bondmen. You shall be sold unto your enemies for bondman and bondwoman, and no man shall buy you. Meaning nobody shall come and try to redeem you. You know, in the biblical history, you can look and see that that when the people got in trouble, they can go take some gold. You know, usually, you know, if you got an old pile of gold and then your enemies come up on you, you know, as I can show throughout Tanakh history, that when the Assyrians came and Syria and all the folks from the eastern nations came to rob us, came to cause us problem, that the king bring out some gold and say, here man, leave us alone, and then how them folks will take that gold and go on their way. Well, that was the same what the creator was saying, that nobody will be able to buy us, meaning that nobody will be able to deliver us or buy us out of the bondage that we was going to, that you couldn't bring no gold. There wasn't nobody to bring no gold to, that we couldn't save ourselves in no kind of way, and could nobody buy us out of this bondage. You know what I'm saying? So that happened. Alright. So we know in the book of Jeremiah that when we said that we was going into Africa to do the Egyptian religion, that we should know that the curses was gonna come down on us. And then this is what many said too. Look, and that ye provoke me unto wrath with the works of your hands, burning incense unto other gods in the land of Egypt, where ye be gone to dwell, that ye might cut yourselves off, and that ye might be a curse and a reproach among all the nations of the earth. Okay, how was those Hebrews gonna get to all nations of the earth from Africa if it wasn't the transatlantic slave trade? You know, we've been taken everywhere, and we all over the earth. In the four corners of the earth is because we are in captivity in America, and then they got us stationed all over the earth in the four corners in their military. You see what I'm saying? But how we are the only people that had ran into Africa to be enslaved, and how you got Africans that was never enslaved, like the pygmies. They didn't bring no ship full of pygmies, and they would have been ideal for picking cotton because they small. They could have been right up close to the plant. You know what I'm saying? And it wouldn't have took nothing to feed them. And then you got the Berbers. The Berbers, not one Berber came to slavery. Not one Berber, not one Ethiopians. The Ethiopians will stand up and tell you right now today, they ain't never been in slavery, and don't come to them with that slavery stuff because they ain't never experienced it. You see what I'm saying? And then you got the Hatusis, them tall, big old Africans for Rwanda. You know what I'm saying? You got a whole bunch of African tribes. You know, even the Arabs was in Africa during the transatlantic slave trade. They had been coming into Africa from Yemen and Saudi Arabia for thousands of years, and how they had trade routes throughout the whole Sahara, but you never seen not one ship Arabs coming to the transatlantic slave trade, and how it was a whole bunch of Africans didn't come to the transatlantic slave trade. You see what I'm saying? And how did they just focus on one people? And it's like I got in the video showing that the Grammentians gonna be our first derogatory name that our enemies called us, and how the Grammentian nation, you know, that's a derogatory name that the Greeks created for them folks in the Sahara that build baby pyramids. You know, we build baby pyramids in the Sahara. You know, when we say we build pyramids, we had that memory lodged in our mind, because we actually did build pyramids, but we built them in Lower Egypt. You see what I'm saying? Baby pyramids. And then that's would be where, you know, our troubles would begin after we left Egypt and went into the Sahara, because everybody know that Egypt was having all them wars. You know, the Babylonians came in and took Egypt over for 50 years, from 588 BC to the Persians whooped them and took it from the Persians. So you know it wouldn't be no Hebrews. The Hebrews that ran into Egypt to dwell would have got on away from Egypt. And you can see signs of us in the Sahara. You know, they got the same houses that the Hebrews had in the promised land, and they had the same technology, the same identical everything. You know, we functioned the same and everything. And that the Creator dried the water up on us in the Sahara, and then that caused us to move around, and how we had conflict with the Chad and the Congo groups and the Angolian groups, and them the folks that took us to the dungeons and sold us to the merchants. And I also showed that the people in West Africa, like Ghana and all those places, how they was there during the transatlantic slave trade, and then how that they was there after the transatlantic slave trade, and how we are not kin to those folks in Africa, because the ones that was there during the transatlantic slave trade are still there in West Africa, and how what none of them were enslaved, and how that they mostly brought the people from the interior of Africa and brought them to the West Coast. You know, it's a lot going on. But this is what we see at Hebrews, you know, to get chased about the land, and how we went into Africa and told the prophet Jeremiah this. You know, then all the men which knew that their wives had burned incense unto other gods, and all the women that stood by, a great multitude, even all the people that dwell in the land of Egypt and Pathros, answered Jeremiah, saying, as for the word that thou hast spoken unto us in the name of the Elohim, we will not hearken unto thee, but we will certainly do so whatever thing go forth out of our own mouth, to burn incense unto the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings unto her, as we have done, we and our fathers, our kings, our princes, in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem. For then had we plenty of food, and were well, and saw no evil. But since we left off to burn incense unto the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings unto her, we have wanted all things, and have been consumed by the sword and by famine. Now, we went into Africa saying that the reason that the Babylonians were causing us problems is because we wasn't in Africa worshiping their religion. And we took off. And those people that said that never returned back to the promised land, because after the Babylonian wars end, you have these prophets, Ezra, Haggai, Zechariah, Sister Esther, Nehemiah, Malachi, gonna be the last book, 430 BC, and how they never mentioned the Hebrews going into Africa to do the Egyptian religion ever come out being reunited with them. You know, that would have stopped this transatlantic slave trade. It wouldn't have been nobody to enslave in Africa and take to a strange land if we had turned back to the covenant and went back to the promised land, because those other nations and people wasn't up under the covenant contract to receive the curses if they broke the covenant. It's why you didn't see the Barbers, the Pygmies, the Ethiopians, the Tawatusis, the Arabs, and all them other Africans wasn't taken from Africa, and how only a selected group of people was taken from Africa to the transatlantic slave trade, the people from the Sahara. You know what I'm saying? They knew who we were. You know, and the other Africans knew who we were. So that's how you know we the Israelites, because we fulfill all the curses that Prophet Moses said would come down on the Hebrews. You know what I'm saying? And these curses are specific, and nobody on the face of this earth suffering from no curses like this. Look, and the Elohim shall make the head, and Elohim shall make the head and not the tail. You know what I'm saying? That's if we followed the law, you know, and did everything. Thou shalt not go aside from any of the words which I command thee this day, to the right hand or to the left hand. But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Elohim thy Yah, to observe to do all his commandments and statutes which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. Cursed shalt thou be in the city, cursed shalt thou be in the field. The Elohim shall send upon thee curse and vexation and rebuke, and all that thou settest thy hand for to do, until thou be destroyed quickly, until thou perish quickly, because of the wickedness of thy doing, where But thou hast forsaken me. And sure enough, in the promised land, like I say, we didn't stay there long. And 800 years ain't no long time. And how we was driven out the land real fast. And how the Canaanite culture that was there before we got there was there for thousands of years. And how we came there and we was driven out in the flesh. So we know that came true. Look, and the heaven, all right. The Elohim shall make the rain of dust powder. Let me see. The Elohim shall cause thee to be smitten before thine enemies. Thou shalt go out one way against them, flee 7 ways before them, and shall be removed in all the kingdoms of the earth. That's what happened to us. The Elohim shall cause thee to be smitten with madness, blindness, and astonishment of heart. And then that come from being on our enemies' religion. Following up after they gods that they done put on us. Thou shalt grope at noonday as the blind gropeth in darkness. Thou shalt not prosper in thy ways, and thou shalt be only oppressed and spoiled evermore, and no man shall save thee. Thou shalt betroth and wife, and another man shall lie with her. Thou shalt build an house, and thou shalt not dwell therein. Thou shalt plant a vineyard, which was the economic. Prophet Moses didn't know nothing about no cotton, but he knew that they was going to be working with a crop that was to be sold and stuff. And the grapes was the symbolic meaning for the cotton. And thou shalt gather the grapes thereof, and our enemies will reap the benefit of all our labor. Thy son and thy daughter shall be given unto another people, and then eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all the day long, and there shall be no might in thine hand. Now we know that happened in the transatlantic slave trade. Also, we knew that other curse happened in the transatlantic slave trade, where the slave owner take the Hebrew sister and rape her, and then the other Hebrews couldn't do nothing about it. It could be 1,500 slaves on a plantation, and one slave owner, and he done just ravished and then just took advantage of everybody. And how that let you know that was the will of the Creator right there. Look, thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and then eyes shall look with longing and fail with longing all the day long, and there shall be no might in thine hand, so that thou shalt be mad for the sight of thine eyes which thou shalt see. The Elohim shall bring thee and thy king which thou shalt set over thee unto a nation which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, and there shalt thou serve gods of wood and stone. And it's a known fact that the Grammatian Empire had multiple kings, a bunch of them, and how when they snatched some of our ancestors and they was over here picking cotton, and how they'll say, I was a king over in Africa, I was a king over in the land, and all of those stuff, So we know all that didn't come to pass. And thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all the nations where the Elohim shall lead thee. See, that's that culture of that black, Negro, African American. Those are proverbs and bywords that our enemies created for us, and how that you can have a heritage with what our enemies created, or you can have a heritage that our enemies hate for you to have. And that's our Hebrew Israelite heritage. The stranger that is within thee shall get above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low. That's like our whole community. Every single business is owned by foreigners, and how they strangling our lights out, and how we can't prosper in no kind of way because our enemies own everything. We are servants to them, and how our enemies let our ancient enemies in to destroy us. And the only reason they getting away with that is because we functioning by the Negro, African American, and black title. And our ancient enemies love for us to have them titles, because they know them titles been kicked around, and that the people up under those titles been stepped on and dogged out, and then they feel like that they can come over here and do the same thing to us, and that how they following in the footsteps of our first oppressors. The stranger that is within thee shall get up above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low. He shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, and thou shalt be the tail. Moreover, all these curses shall come upon thee, and shall pursue thee, and overtake thee till thou be destroyed, because thou hearkenest not unto the voice of the Elohim thy Yah, to keep his commandments and his statutes which he command thee. And that's a known fact that after we had left the promised land, going into Africa, because we said the only reason the Babylonians is getting us and causing us trouble is because we ain't in Africa doing their religion. And then how them curses pursued us and overtook us in the Sahara, because we had a little water system coming up out the ground, and then how it dried up on us, and then how they dispersed us. It lasted us for about a good 1,000 years of getting water in the ground, and then it dried up, and then how we was dispersed, and then immediately after that slavery came down on us. And they shall be for a sign and wonder. And more of all these curses shall be upon thee, and shall pursue thee, and overtake thee till thou be destroyed, because thou hearkenest not unto the voice of the Elohim thy Yah, to keep his commandments and his statutes which he command thee. And they shall be upon thee for a sign and for a wonder upon thee seed forever, because thou servest not the Elohim thy Yah with joyfulness and with gladness of heart for the abundance of all things. And we had everything. And then we turned to them old Canaanite culture and was destroyed. Therefore shall thou serve thine enemies, which the Elohim shall send against thee, in hunger and in thirst and in nakedness and want of all things. And he shall put a yoke of iron upon their neck until he have destroyed thee. The Elohim shall bring a nation against thee from far. Now we know we the only people that done left Africa with a yoke on our neck, and how it destroyed us. The Elohim shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand. That's like ain't got no good speech now, and we've been in captivity for 400 years, and how some of us still ain't gravitated towards the English language or mastered it, and how we still, speak broken English. You know what I'm saying? All right, and we know that bald eagle symbolized American power and its system, a nation of furious contents which shall not regard the person of the old, nor show favor to the young. You know what I'm saying? And he shall eat the fruit of thy cattle and the fruit of thy land. And sure enough, that's what happened to us. So all them curses come up on us, and there's plenty more curses. And then that main one, and the Elohim shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way of where I spake unto thee, and thou shalt see it no more again. And there you should be sold unto your enemies for bondman and bondwoman, and no man shall buy you, meaning nobody will redeem us out of our troubles. Couldn't bring no pot of gold to the enemies and say, here, release them. Like I said, you can have a heritage created by your enemies, which is that AA, African American, Negro, black culture, or you can have a heritage your enemies hate for you to have, and that's your Israelite heritage. And all you got to do is study the Tanakh and see what we did. And it's easy to come back into your heritage. It's easy to come back into an Israelite heritage. All you got to do is forsake your enemy's God. Some of y'all don't want to let Jesus go. You reinvent a new name for him, Yawashi. Well, that's still our enemy's God, because our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, never worshiped no God's son, or were never told to do so. You see what I'm saying? And how did that come up after the book of Malachi closed? The book of Malachi closed 430 BC. And how did that Jesus book in this history come up 500 years later? Like 187,000 days went by. Then they come with this God's son, and as I proved in the other videos, that it wasn't no Israelites in the New Testament, no Hebrews in the New Testament, and that how the Greeks destroyed them. This is a message from the Israelite Brotherhood. Like I say, you can have a culture that your enemies hate for you to have, or you can have a culture that your enemies created. You know, our enemies created the black, the Negro, the African American. They created them, you know, and it's like that meaning black means death, destruction, gloomy, and no good. And that's the heritage that they want you to have. Or you can have a heritage that your enemy ain't got nothing to do with. He have zero to do with us being the Israelite. He ain't trying to tell us we Israelites. He ain't trying to point us in that direction. He ain't trying to mention it. He ain't trying to have nothing to do with our Israelite heritage. You ain't seeing it on TV. You ain't hearing it on the radio. He ain't having nothing to do with this, but yet thousands of us are waking up every day to that we are the Israelites. Like I said, it's easy to prove that we are the Hebrews. All you got to do is use the book of Jeremiah on them. You know, those Hebrews didn't come back from worshiping the Egyptian religion in the Sahara, because if they did, then the prophet Ezra, Nehemiah, Haggai, and Zechariah and Malachi would have said something. They would have said, hey, the Hebrews come back from out of Africa from worshiping the Egyptian religion, and now they back home with us. You see what I'm saying? And then that's what the Creator wanted from the beginning, is for us to stay on the land that he gave us and worship him only. Well, that didn't happen. So, you know, those curses had to come to pass. You know, it's impossible for Moses to say the curses gonna be on the Hebrews, but yet there's no Hebrews for the curses to be on, because we know that the Jews didn't run into Africa to be enslaved. So how would them curses be on the Jews? They are not even the Hebrews. So you ain't gonna see no curses on them. You ain't gonna see no curses on those Africans. They wasn't took into no strange land. You ain't gonna see no curses on none of the folks that ain't Hebrews, and that you are just gonna see the curses on the Hebrews, who we represent. So like I say, you can have a heritage created by your enemies, or you can have a heritage that your enemies hate for you to have. You can have a heritage that your enemies hate for you to have. They hate for you to say that you're a Hebrew Israelite. That burn them up inside. If you want to make your enemy mad, tell him that you're a Hebrew Israelite. If you want your enemy to hate you, tell him that you're a Hebrew Israelite. That's all you got to do. You ain't got to do nothing else but say, I'm a Hebrew Israelite. He going to instantly freeze up, because he know what time it is, and he know what us being the Israelite means. You know what I'm saying? That mean that the curses that the Creator put on us is coming to them. Look, that then the Elohim thy Yah would turn thy captivity and have compassion on thee, and will return thee and gather thee from all the nations where the Elohim thy Yah have scattered thee. If any be driven out unto the uttermost parts of heaven, from thence will the Elohim thy Yah gather thee, and from thence will he fetch thee. And the Elohim thy Yah will bring thee into the land which thy fathers possessed, and thou shalt possess it, and he shall do thee good, and multiply thee above thy fathers. And the Elohim thy Yah will circumcise thee in heart, and in the heart of thy seed, to love the Elohim thy Yah with all thee in heart, and with all thy soul, that thou mayest live. And the Elohim thy Yah will put all these curses upon thine enemies, upon them that hate thee, which prosecute thee. You see what I'm saying? So if we want the curses to get on our enemies, all we got to do is start breaking away from the heritage that they created for us. That Negro, African American, and black culture. If we break away from that and say we the Hebrew Israelites, then our enemies gonna fold up. You know, they can't do nothing about that. They cannot tell you that you are not an Israelite. All they try to do is say, well, show your proof. That's what they gonna say. Well, show your proof. And then how you show your proof is the book of Jeremiah, showing that how we ran into Africa to do the Egyptian religion, and how we were enslaved from there, and how that our enslavement wasn't everybody enslavement in Africa, because like I said, the Barbers were never enslaved. The Arabs been in Africa for almost 2,000 years before the transatlantic slave trade started. They wasn't enslaved. The Pygmies wasn't enslaved. The Sattusis wasn't enslaved. The Ethiopians wasn't enslaved. The Egyptians wasn't enslaved. None of those tribes of people was enslaved. And that how only a certain people were enslaved. So like I said, if you want to make your enemies mad, all you have to do is start claiming a heritage that they did not create and that they don't have no control of. And they don't have no control over the Hebrew Israelite heritage. Well, they got a little control over the Hebrew Israelite heritage through those camps, them organizations that's using Jewish myths to explain Israelite history. You know, that's why the people can't progress or move forward in the Israelite heritage, is because the majority, if not all the organizations, are teaching Jewish myths, lies, and the Hebrews can't see their heritage. You know, they know they Hebrews, but they can't see it. You know, they know they Hebrews, but they can't see it. And you will never be able to see your heritage using that 10 lost tribe myth, or the Hebrews ran into Africa in 70 AD, or the Hebrews went everywhere during the Syrian times, and how the Hebrews in the New Testament. All those are lies, and you can't see your heritage with them lies. Shalom, this is a message from the Israelite Brotherhood. Like I say, you can have a heritage created by your enemies, or you can have a heritage your enemies hate for you to have. It's up to you to make that choice today. Shalom.